3, 2, 1, go. Alright, welcome to another crash course in Nomad Sculpt. This is Nomad Sculpt 1.90. So we're going to make this little cube characters. I think I might start making a bunch of characters like this. So let's get started with a brand new canvas. So I'm just going to hit new. And your background might be a different color. If so, don't worry about it. If you tap here in this little picture icon, this is where you change the color of the background, so you can pretty much make it whatever it is. You also might see a grid. So right down here is the little toggle for the grid. So we'll just put it on for now because yours is probably on. So now we have our white sphere, and usually what I do is delete the sphere because the size is kind of big for a sphere. So just tap here. This is the scene menu, so this is where all your shapes are going to go once you get started. So let's just go ahead, here's the sphere, let's just hit delete, and let's add a cylinder. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's use our gizmo. So the gizmo is like a controller, so any shape that you add, we'll just use the gizmo to control it. So if you look over here, this is your toolbox, and now it's expanded and you can see gizmo, and you notice that a lot of these tools are grayed out. And that's because we haven't validated the shape. So obviously things right off the bat start getting a little confusing, but don't worry too much about it. Validation is just, once we tap validate, then all these things will, you'll be able to use all the tools. But right now there's just some special things you can do before the object is like officially in the project. So that's all that is. Anytime you add a shape or a primitive, that's what the raw shape is called. It's called a primitive. Every time you add one, you're going to have to validate, but there's a few things you can do before you validate. So right now we'll use gizmo, and you'll see the gizmo here. We have the orange ring, the big orange ring around it. That's just the size. And then we have the arrows. So we have green going up and down, red, left and right. Whoops. Also notice that I just tapped with 2 fingers to undo. Same as Procreate. And obviously it's 3D, so there's a blue one, but you can't see it because it's facing directly at us. So we'll just turn like this, and then you can see the blue arrow as well. This little thing is called a snap cube. So let's just hit front. And that just easily shows you, what position you're looking at the sculpt. So that just makes it really easy. If it's like this, you can just go right to the front. So if yours looks a little different than mine, there's a few things that it could be. So firstly, if yours is like pixelated, or if you can see the lines in it, all that is smooth shading. So there's regular raw shapes, and then there's smooth shading. So if you look at mine, you can see there's like a weird, you can see that it's trying to calculate and make it smooth and add some gradient. So it's trying to shade this smoothly. So if you go here to this little sphere and you go down, there's smooth shading. So right now, auto for mine is on. But if I turn it off, then you can see all these pieces. I usually like to work with smooth shading on for most of the time. So I'm just going to go back here and just put it to on. And then yours should look just like mine. So also, if you hit front, there's also a thing called orthographic and perspective. So all that is it's kind of like orthographic is just seeing the shape for what it is. If you tap this little camera here, then you'll see orthographic and perspective. I'm not sure what yours will be in default, probably orthographic, but if you look at it in perspective, then notice that it's a little different. You see how like you can, perspective just is kind of like how we view things with our eyes, but it can be a little tricky when we're trying to view things in a project like this. Because let's say, for example, I clone it and then I move one forward and over, and then we're looking at the front. See, now this one is bigger than this one. So if you're trying to make something, if you're trying to work, this can mess you up a little bit because you're going to be like, oh, these aren't the same size. I need to make them the same size. So you go like this. Okay, now they're even. But then you turn it and they're not even. So that's the reason why I always use orthographic when I'm sculpting. Okay, so now that we've gotten through that, let's change this to a matte cap. So all a matte cap is it disregards the lighting It disregards mostly the color of this. Right now it's just like white, but it's a little hard to see. I kind of like my sculpts to look like clay. So what we'll do is go to this little lighting window, or this little lighting little nugget here. So we'll tap there and change from lit PBR to matte cap. And now it looks a little bit more like clay. For me, it's a little bit easier to see. If you have a different image here, just tap this and then just find PXG clays. The app can crash and you'll lose things. So there is autosave. Yours might be on by default. I have mine off. I've just trained myself to save very often. So in order to save, we'll just tap this little folder. So just hit save and we'll just name it, I'll name this one Cuber. Usually as I go along, you'll see I save a lot. So all I did was scroll out on the window and I hit, see right now I'm in right, I want to be in front. So we'll turn it to front. So now I know I'm looking at the front of the sculpt. So now let's make this a little bit bigger. So remember, we're using the Gizmo. You should see this orange ring. The orange ring is size. So let's just make it bigger. Let's just fill up the square. Okay, so now we want to line the top of this cylinder with this red line. So obviously there's a few ways to do that. You can not only use the arrow, but you can also use this green, these little nodes here. So those just like kind of squash and pull. So that's what those are. So those are just other ways that you can manipulate the cylinder. Now remember I said that there's a few things that you can do before we validate. So if you see the Gizmo here, there's also the little cylinder. So now these are all other options that we can do. And not all shapes have this, but I just want to show you just so you have an idea of why we haven't validated yet and what we can do. So for example, if I wanted to make it a cone, something like that, or if I wanted to have a hole in it, I could go like this. And then you can change different values, the whole thing. So there's lots of things that you can do to alter the original primitive, the original shape, before you validate it. Once you validate, those special nodes go away. So you can't, adjust the cone or adjust the size. So that was just a real quick rundown of validate. So there's a few things that you can do before it's actually part of the project. Okay, so let's go back to our Gizmo. Sometimes it's a little hidden there. And we already made it bigger. So let's just squash it till about here. Let's move it down and just line up the top with that red line. Perfect. And I want to make this softer. So this is a little advanced, but I think you can follow along. So we'll tap these three dots. Post subdivision, we'll slide that up to 2. And then division X, let's put down to 25. Let's bring it up to 30. I think that's fine. Okay, so now that we have this little podium here, this is going to be the floor. I don't really need the grid anymore. Let's turn it off. And now we can start sculpting our character on top of this little thing. So one thing that you should always do is label everything. So we'll go back here to the scene menu. We see this cylinder. We can now validate it. And you see it turns from a yellow type to white. 3 little dots, name, and we'll just name it floor. Okay, so first piece is done. We have the floor, we have the base to do our little cube character. So as you can guess, let's do a cube. So let's do add, and we'll do box. And we'll just move this little guy up. So remember, we use Gizmo. We'll tap on this little Gizmo, we'll move it up. He's gonna have little short legs. I think they should probably fit okay under there. So now we have our cube. And remember, again, if yours looks different than mine, it's probably smooth shading. I'm going to go ahead and leave mine on. So before I validate, let's tap these 3 dots. Post subdivision, let's put it to 2. And this is just really going to make the edges a little softer. And then we'll just scroll this down a little bit so the edges are a little soft. So I'll do about 15 for the box topology, division X. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and validate. Less dense is like soft clay. More dense is a high resolution clay. So that's all that this number is right here, 24.5. So you can control that with voxel remeshing. So there's a shortcut here, and you'll see there's like voxel remesh, but there's also, if you go up here, so then you see voxel and you see remesh. And you can change the resolution. See all those little squares? I'll turn on the wireframe. Right now it's on 50, but you see, if I slide it up, it's just cutting all of those squares in half and half and half and half and making it more dense. Let's put our number to 175 and hit remesh. So now you can see it's more dense. All these squares are very, very tiny. And you see the size is 185K, so that's big. But we're going to change it later, so it's okay. I'll turn off the wireframe. Let's go ahead and add some legs in. So let's tap here, add, sphere. So we'll use our gizmo. So now we see the gizmo on the sphere. So any object that you press, the gizmo is going to jump so you can control that object. So we'll go back to the sphere. So we're just going to use the orange ring to shrink it. Okay, that's a pretty good size. So we'll just kind of move it up a little bit. And we'll move it to the left. So one really cool thing about sculpting is you can use mirror. So a mirror will mirror from one side to the other side. The default symmetry will always be aligned straight down the middle of your project. So now we can tap mirror and we'll have two spheres instead of one. So these are going to be the legs, so we can kind of position them kind of close together. We can use this little red node to kind of make them thinner. Let's take a look on the side. So they're still quite small. Let's make them a little bit bigger, a little more chunky. I like that. And you can even use these rings. So see the blue ring, green ring. So all those do is rotate. So sometimes it's fun to kind of rotate the legs and stuff out a little bit. So you can feel free to adjust the legs. Just make them look the way that you want them to look. I think that looks pretty good. You can also stretch them up and down. So I'll just hit front. And notice how as we change the shape, the gizmo sort of moves with the shape. But if I still want to do it straight up and down or move it left and right, you can hit align. Align will always align with the project. So up and down will always be up and down. Left and right will always be left and right. So now let's say I just wanted to stretch them up a little bit. We could do something like that. So let's remember to label everything so we don't get confused. So this is our leg. And remember, our leg, we hit mirror. So we have this little mirror here and the sphere is in it. So it's one shape, but it's showing up as two. Let's long press this and just move it up. So for mirror, let's rename this legs. And we can rename this legs as well. Legs. And we can validate. It's still only validating one of the legs. Now remember, later on, we're going to validate the whole, this whole mirror and make them actually two pieces, but they're going to be together. But for now, we just want to validate the legs so that the legs is white. Okay, let's take the floor and just move it to the bottom. And the box, I'm just going to change this to cube. So, and there's one thing that I want to warn you about. Sometimes when you add a shape, it might go into a mirror. So if we add a sphere, sometimes it goes into the mirror. So now it's already mirrored. So if you were to tap your gizmo here, you can see that it's already mirrored. So let's take this sphere out of the mirror. And now we can work on it on its own. So let's rename it toes. And now we can work on it. So we're going to pretend that we only have this one leg here for now. And we're going to take the sphere and we're going to shrink it. So we'll use gizmo. We'll shrink it. We'll kind of move it into place. Oh, make sure you're on the right 3D object. So we'll kind of move it into place. Let's make it a little smaller. Let's flatten it with this node. That looks pretty cute. So this looks pretty good. I kind of like them with the toes sort of pointed towards each other. If you want, you can stretch this way. You know, you can just kind of make it look however you want it to look, but I think that looks pretty cute. Okay, that looks good. So now we can go ahead and make the other one. So let's take the mirror. We'll tap mirror, and now that he has 2 toes, and they look good. So right now they're both in mirrors. I'm going to take toes and just drag it out of the mirror, and then take leg and drag it out of the mirror as well. So now we just have one side of them. So let's take toes and we can validate it. And of course, if you hit solo, you can see that they're really just shapes. So let's voxel remesh both of these before we trim them. So first, let's go to this leg. We'll go to voxel. Let's remesh it at like 150. That's okay. And again, that's the same as going up here, voxel, and just changing the number to 150 and hitting remesh. So we'll tap on the toe part. We'll do the same thing, about 150, and we'll remesh. So now that we've remeshed them both separately, let's remesh them together. So we'll take the toes and the legs, voxel remesh, and we'll probably do it around, let's do it at like 200. So 200 will remesh. So now they'll be joined together. We can use smooth. We can kind of smooth this out a little bit. Just make sure you stay on the actual mesh. So we'll just kind of smooth it out. Looks good. And now we'll press left, and now we can trim it. So we can trim the bottom. So we'll use the trim tool, rectangle, and we'll just make the white rectangular box. Now we don't want to put it right up to the edge. We want to give it a little space. So I'm bringing it down a slight bit, and then I'll hit trim. So if we hit solo, you can see that it's trimmed. Now it's still a little jagged. Sometimes what I do is I voxel remesh again and hope that that gets cleaned up. So maybe we can try like 175. Let's see. Okay, so that looks a lot cleaner. And you can take smooth and just, you know, be gentle and kind of smooth out the bottom a little bit. It's not that big of a deal, it's the bottom, but you know, I like it to be fairly clean. Okay, so this looks pretty good. So let's hit solo. So this is a nice first foot. So now we have this. Let's go ahead and add a mirror. So now we've just mirrored that foot. And I'm going to name this mirror foot. Oops. So now we have both of our feet here. And we can bring the size down a little bit later. So now we have that nice crease in the middle, but we have 2 perfect little feet. Let's go ahead and save. Okay, so now let's make some arms. So we'll just use spheres for the arms. So we'll go ahead and go to our scene menu, add a sphere. So you see that it automatically added it into the mirror, but that's okay. We can just keep it there. So let's just take the sphere. Let's go ahead and validate it. And let's name this arm. So we'll just tap on the red mirror and we'll just change the name to arms. And we can actually take this sphere, let's clone it. And let's drag it down to legs. So now it's in the leg mirror. And we can change that to ears. Okay, so we'll just hide this one for now. And we'll come back to it later. So now let's tap on that sphere again. This is going to be the arms. I'll just label it so it's less confusing. So now we'll use our gizmo and we'll move it up. We'll move it over. You can see that both of the arms are coming over. Kind of looks like a praying mantis head. So we'll shrink it. So now how big do we want the arms? I think that's pretty good. We don't want them too much bigger than the foot. So now I'm going to stretch it out. Kind of like that. And I'm going to use this blue ring. We can kind of just tilt it a little bit. I think that looks pretty cute for an arm. So now the move tool is great for manipulating our different shapes. So let's say we want to give it a little bit of a bend like this. Let's say we want to kind of angle it out a little bit more. We can stretch this a little bit more into the body. So you can see I'm just kind of manipulating the sphere to kind of get what shape that I want. And I'll make the move tool a little bit smaller so you can have a little bit more control over what's happening if you make the tool's radius a little bit smaller. So now once your arm is in place, I just like to take smooth and just kind of smooth it out a little bit, just a habit. Now we want to make the palms. So like, where are the palms for your character? Let's use flatten. So we use the flatten tool. I'll put the radius to like 90 or so. Intensity is like 50. So the palm is just kind of the flat part at wherever the end is. So let's make it right around here. I think that's pretty good. And you can always change it. If you want it to be a little bit more on the bottom, you can make it on the bottom, or you can use the gizmo and you can kind of adjust the arm like this. And please excuse the cat noises. I left a bag on the floor so the cat could play, and she loves to make noise while I'm recording. So now let's go ahead and make some fingers for the arms. So you can feel free to smooth it out if you want. You can give it a little smooth, but we'll use inflate. Inflate's one of my favorite tools. So right now the arms are 6,146, so let's make them a little more dense. So let's voxel remesh this, and we'll do around 175 or so. Again, that's the same as going up here, voxel, and sliding the remesh to 175. So we'll remesh, that's okay. Okay, we can go ahead and maybe smooth it a little bit again if you want to get rid of those. The cat is on the scratcher now. So we'll just use inflate and we'll just see how I let off and then I go back. So we just want to make a nice little round little finger here. And we'll do some over here. 1, 2, 3. Usually 3 is pretty good. 1, 2. Another little finger here. Sometimes you can take like drag. Sometimes you can use tools and sort of shift things around a little bit. Drag is great for shifting, but not moving like all of everything. Move will try to move everything in the surrounding area. Drag will just try to concentrate on a smaller area. So I use drag for more detailed movements. I use move, for example, the arm. It's just a more smooth movement to make everything kind of work as uniformly as possible. Drag, I might just kind of tuck this in a little bit. Make the inside a little flat. You can do that with the other fingers as well. Just kind of tuck. Give them a little tuck if you want. I think that looks pretty cute. So now I'll just take voxel remesh and 183 is fine. I'll just remesh it again. So this will sort of solidify the fingers up a little bit, and then I'll just gently smooth. I don't want to smooth very hard because, or very strongly, because too much pressure will just cause the shapes to kind of get lost. You can hit solo, and now you just want to make sure that they're nice and smooth and round, and they look sort of organic as they can. So that's a cute little nugget arm with fingers, and I like it. I think it's cute. So now let's go back to the ears. So we'll go to our scene menu. We have arms, and now we have these ears. So we'll just expand this. We'll tap on this. I'll just name it ears so there's no confusion. So now we'll go back to our gizmo. We'll move it up. Shrink it. However big you want his ears. But I like this, so I'm going to stretch it with this node here. And then I want the bottom to sort of taper. So we'll go to symmetry. We'll use X. Let's put it to local. And let's put show line. So now you can see the symmetry line. You can see that red line. So we want to do this way, and we want to do it crossway so that every move that we're doing, it's affecting the front and the back and the left and the right. There's also top and the bottom, but we don't want to do that. So as you can see, Y, see this green line? That means it's going to affect the top and the bottom. So we don't want that. We want Z. That means it's going to affect the left and the right. You can see the blue line here. And if you don't see them, remember you want to be on local. So now we'll go back to the move tool. And of course you don't have to use symmetry. If it's really confusing, just don't even worry about it. All we're doing is using the symmetry to help us keep this even. See? So that's all it does, is we're just kind of using it so we don't have to try to get it symmetrical on all sides. So we'll make the move tool a little bit bigger. Let's hit solo. And I'm just going to taper the end of this. Just kind of pulling it down a little bit. I'll make the move tool nice and big so that the movements are a little bit more smooth, like I was saying before. And I'll turn it to its left and also make sure that it's, you know, a bit even on all directions. So now that's tapered. It looks good from the side. It looks good from the front. We'll make it a little bit wider here. So now I think it looks good from both directions. Well, let's look at the front again. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. We'll hit solo. And remember, we're already in the ear mirror, so we can just take the gizmo and just slide it over. And now we have two ears. So maybe let's try slanting them. Maybe you want them kind of slanted together, like this. Maybe you don't want them. Maybe you want them apart. You can make them smaller if you want. Endless possibilities with what you can do with the ears. One thing I do want to do is give them a little bit of a bend backwards. So with that, we want to use move, but you can't use it now because remember, we still have the symmetry for the back and the front. So let's go back to symmetry and turn off Z. So now it's just the left and the right side. Forget the other one exists. If it's in a mirror, concentrate on just one of the ears. So now we'll make the move tool really big and we'll just kind of give it a push until we get a nice little curve. I like that. Then we'll go back to the gizmo and then just figure out where we want to position it. And if we want it to have a little bit of flavor like that. I think that looks pretty good. I like that. So let's go ahead and save. So now we have both arms, we have the feet, we have the ears. So now let's do the face. Okay, so now let's make the eyes and the mouth. So we're really close. Okay, so we have the cube. Let's go ahead and add a cylinder. So we want the cylinder to, if we just hit solo, let's use our gizmo and just move it up a little bit. So we want it to rotate towards us. So let's hit snap. See, it says 90 here. And just so you know, there's two snaps. We want the snap with the little angle. So now it's 90, so it'll only turn 90 degrees. So we do this, and now it's 90 degrees. And I'll just uncheck that for now. So let's turn smooth shading off. So we'll just go here and we'll turn smooth shading off. We'll hit front. Now we just want to make it the mouth. So we're going to use this shape to cut into the cube. So let's use trim, rectangle. Let's make it right about here. So a little bit lower than the halfway point, something like that. Let's hit solo. So now we'll use the gizmo, and remember we're on the cylinder. We're still on the cylinder. Let's move it up and out. And we want to make this in the middle just because I always adjust the gizmo. So this is the pivot point. The center of the gizmo is the pivot point. So right now, if we pivot, it's going to be going around that pivot point. Pivot, center, pivot. So now that center point is where it's going to turn. Okay. So now we can adjust this and we can place it into the cube. Let's make it a little smaller. And let's use this, if we bring it out, let's use this to shrink it. So we're going to use that little blue sphere to make it a little bit smaller. So we'll push it in. Let's bring it up a little bit higher. It's a little hard to see. So bring it up a little higher, maybe to around here. I think that looks good. And now one cool thing that Nomad has is X-ray. So now you can actually see how far that is in the cube. So we'll turn that off. So now let's do the eyes. So for the eyes, we'll add another cylinder. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and name this mesh, which is the mouth. Let's name that mouth, and I'll just put a big X there because we're gonna cut that. So now let's take this cylinder, we'll do the same thing. We'll go to the little gizmo and we will do snap. We'll snap it forward towards us. I'll just move mine out a little bit so you can see. So I'll move it up, shrink it, and we'll take this and squash it in like that. So now what we're going to do is use this to kind of stretch it and just make the eye. So first, let's hit validate. Let's go to here, the materials, and let's change smooth shading to off. Okay, so now we'll hit, let's go to make sure we're on our gizmo. Let's scroll up, make sure symmetry's on. Go to the vertex, hit the little symmetry thing and hit vertex. So symmetry on, vertex, vertex. And now we can stretch it. You can do this in any direction, but we want to stretch it up and down so it's making this longer, which is different than this. We don't want this, we want it to stretch like a pill. So we need to go to symmetry and we need to set it so that it's going to be pulling from the opposite direction. So we want the line to go across the middle. So let's see, X. Notice I don't see any of them. Let's hit local, and then we should be able to see them. So first we're seeing the red. We'll turn that off. Green, we'll turn that off. Blue, that's the one we want. So we want the blue X, the blue Z, excuse me. So now you can take the arrow and you can either up or down, but one of them will pull them apart away from each other, and that's what we want. So we want something like this. Hit solo. So this is what we want, this kind of shape. And then we can go ahead and turn symmetry off. And then we can tap here and go back to auto. Okay, it looks good. So let's hit solo again and let's maneuver this into position. So we'll push it back. We want it just to go inside. We'll make it a little smaller. We'll put it around here. We just need to mirror it on the other side. But the only thing is that this is set for Z. So we need to take it off of Z and set it to X. So instead of local, we'll hit world again. So now we'll go to here. We have the eyes, add, mirror. So then it shows up on the other side. Okay, looks pretty cute. Also, don't be afraid to experiment. You can do things like turn it sideways, and you can make different types of eyes. You can use different shapes. Don't be afraid to experiment. So now what we want to do is, so these eyes, I like where they are. They're looking good. Let's go ahead and validate the whole thing. So you can tap the mirror, hit validate, join children, and then hit yes. So now we have our mirror. So this is the eyes. Let's clone it. So we cloned it. And now we're going to put a big X after this one. So now we have two versions so that we can have one version that we cut into the cube and one version that we can it'll still be the eyes there. So let's hide the eyes without the X. Let's select the mouth with the X, the eyes with the X. So we have only those two selected plus the cube. Let's do a quick save. So now we'll just go back here to the scene menu and we can use a Boolean. So in order to use a Boolean, in order to cut one shape out of another shape, you have to select all of them and then turn the ones you want to cut, make them hidden. They're still selected, but you see the eye is hidden. And if you have trouble or if you're getting stuck with trying to select certain things, here's how you fix that. So go to advanced and you might have sync visibility checked. If you do, then it might, let's see, eyes. See how it gets all weird and it won't let you do what you want to do? I don't know why this is on by default. I think it's just really confusing. Just go to advanced and uncheck sync visibility, and then you'll be good to actually do whatever you want to do in here. So now we'll select all of these. We'll hide X, Boolean, Boolean, and now these are cut into the shape. And it's looking good. So another thing that it did is because some of the shapes that we Booleaned, we turned smooth shading off, it turned it off for the cube. But that's okay, we can just go here and turn it on. And let's give it a nice voxel remesh. So I'm gonna voxel remesh it at like 250. We'll hit remesh. You can take smooth and just kind of smooth out the inside of the mouth. I don't like those like kind of ribs that it makes. And you have symmetry on, so it's just gonna do both sides at once, which is always helpful. I'll be really gentle with the eyes because I wanna make sure I'm keeping that shape. A little less like inside the mouth, that's okay. I don't mind that losing a little shape in there. Okay, looks good. And we can actually smooth out the rest of this cube as well. And just keep it nice and smooth. Okay, so now we have our eyes, which we can unhide. So now there's eyes. We'll use the gizmo. Let's do pivot, center pivot. And we'll just move these back into there, and it looks good. You can even make them a little bit bigger if you want an exact snug feel. And here's a little trick, since it's just one shape, but we want to adjust them. You can go to symmetry, and you can change this vertex to vertex, and then you should be able to move these around as though they are in a mirror again. So it's a little tricky, but it's a useful tool when you need to do that. But let's say you forget and you're like, oh, I want to make these bigger, but I don't want them to move. The easy thing to do is just take trim, turn symmetry off, and just cut one. So just get to the point where you only have one. And once you have one, you're back to just using one. You can use your gizmo. If it's not on there, pivot, center, pivot. Now you can make it bigger, smaller, whatever you want. And the only reason I made it bigger, now it's nice and clean, like right to all the edges. Looks great. Once you're happy, you can just go here and you can just add a mirror like we've always done. And then it creates that mirror again. And you're good to go. So these are the eyes. So now for the teeth. Experiment with different types of, this is the cube. Let's make sure we keep these labeled. So this is the cube. Let's add, I think the cylinder looked really good for the teeth. So we add a cylinder. I'm gonna go ahead and use my gizmo, move it up, drop it towards me, shrink it, and then smush it with this little sphere. Okay, we can place it into position. That looks good. And then we can go ahead and tap mirror, and you can move them. You can have two teeth if you want. You can have them right under the eyes. You can have them together like that, which I kind of like. Go pull it up a little bit, so then we have two. You can hit clone, and we'll move this over, and we'll do the fang version because everyone liked the fang version. So now I'm going to shrink it, and I'm just going to pull it a little bit. You can even tilt it this way a little bit. So now he has like little fangs, which I think are really cute. I'm going to pull this up so that it's kind of a little bit more in line with the other teeth. But I think that looks good. So now we have our teeth. They look great. So here's our teeth. Let's validate both of these. These are all going to be teeth. And let's just rename the mirror teeth so we don't get confused. And we'll hit save. All right, so it looks really good. Let's add a tongue lastly. So we'll just add a sphere. It's going to go into this mirror. So let's make sure we take it out. This can be tongue. So let's use our gizmo. Let's just bring it up here. And this is kind of my quick and dirty tongue. So we'll just shrink it, squash it a little bit like this. Squash it like this. Looks great. Now we'll use mirror. We'll move them out from each other, and then we'll use the green ring to just bring them forward. Let's turn off snap so we can just move it freely. So we have something like that. Looks great. We'll validate. We'll take this mirror and validate it. Join children. Yes. Let's rename this tongue. And let's voxel remesh it. And 150 should be good. Give it a nice smooth. Then we have a nice little simple easy tongue. So we'll take gizmo, pivot, center pivot. You always want to center your pivot on the shape. Right front. We'll bring this right down. It's good. Now you're gonna have to figure out exactly where you want it. It can be a little tricky for me because I don't know how to make up my mind, but I think I like to tilt it forward a bit and bring it forward. I think I like that around there. I think that looks good. And there's also, you can, if you want to add a little more depth, you can tap the cube. You can use clay and you can use sub. Sub will always subtract. If you don't use sub, clay will add clay. But if you use sub, then it takes it away. And sometimes it's nice to, you can add a little bit of depth like behind the tongue. So take some clay away and then just kind of smooth it. Just to give it a little something. So just showing you some options. I'm gonna leave mine flat. Okay, so he looks really good. And now we'll just do a quick lighting. So now we can change it from, so we use this little sun, we'll change it from matte cap to lit PBR. And it needs to be on lit PBR in order to color it and everything like that. Looks really good. So let's select everything except for the floor. So we select everything, let's uncheck floor. And let's change everything to a neutral color. I usually like to do color like this. It might be a little dark. I'll make it a little lighter. So maybe we'll do something like that. I'm gonna hit clone so I can now save that color. Yeah, I think that looks good. So we want this color, just hit paint all and it'll paint everything. Actually, you can do the floor as well. You can paint the floor as well. So now it's neutral. So I'm gonna hit save because now it's a neutral color. It'll be better to light this way. So first we wanna turn off other lights. So this is my own environment. So this is on my Gumroad and my Patreon. It's only a few dollars, but I use it for everything. I love the way it looks. But for now, we're gonna turn that off. And we just have our nice silhouette. And we can add our first light. So we'll go to this little lighting panel here and we'll add our first light. Looks great. Let's change this. So we'll just tap that and change that to 2. That's what I always do. And let's tap the little pencil there and name this key. So this is the key light. The key light is the main light that we're going to use. So we'll add another light and let's move it over. So I think it's this light. We'll use the gizmo. We'll move it over. And actually, let's take this one and move it over and up. So now the arrow is pointing kind of like where the light is coming from. It just makes it easier. So this light, oh, I did it the wrong way, didn't I? Let's put the key up here and this other light, even though it's facing the same direction, that's fine. Now that this light is over here, let's change the name so I don't get confused. This is going to be, let's name it Edge. So now we want this light to just give a nice bright edge to this. So the light is going to go wherever this arrow is pointing. So just use your little rings and you just rotate it until you see a nice sliver of light. You want it real slivery. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. You know, you can put it more on the side if you want. That actually looks nice. Maybe increase this to like 4, the intensity, so it's nice and bright. And maybe we'll make it a little warmer by just tapping the color and just putting it to something a little warmer. So let's take this light and clone it. We're going to tap these 2 little things here. And let's change this name to R2. And now we can use it with the gizmo. We'll drag this one over to this side, and we'll point the light coming from the other direction. So we'll just rotate it. That looks good. It's a little stronger. So let's take this and put this to maybe 2. So we'll soften that. We'll change the lighting to maybe something a little more cool, like so. So now there's a cool light on the other side. Actually, maybe I'll make it, feels very strong, so I'm going to just tone it down a bit. Okay, I think I like that a little bit better. So we have a little bit of a blue light coming from here. It's mixing with this, and it's kind of making it a little more green. So you might have to kind of play around with it to make it a little more blue if you want. I think I like that. So now we have 3 lights. Let's add a last one. I'm just going to call it D2 since I always named the one before it R2. Let's change this light. So let's hit the little sun here. Let's change it to a spotlight. And this works just like a flashlight. So let's make sure we can see it here. Pull it up, forward. I kind of just want to put it so it's facing, so we get to see his little face. And see this little orange node? We'll make it a little bit wider and maybe a little bit brighter. So that looks pretty good. So now is a good time to turn on post-process. So post-process will show you kind of what it looks like when it'll be finished. So it'll calculate everything the correct way, but it will slow your device down a little bit, like it may cause it to lag, so just take note of that. So we'll tap here, put the quality all the way up. You don't have to do that yet. We'll turn on post-process, and now you can see it changed a little bit. I usually use reflection. I turn that on, global illumination. I put that all the way up. This is important. Ambient occlusion is the shadows from the environment, like from just the lights and stuff like that. So all these shadows, that's part of ambient occlusion. You can see if I turn it up or down, they get kind of lighter and darker. So I'll just reset it to where it was. And you can play around with all these. Bloom, I think this is by default. I do have one that I use all the time. You can tap here, go down, and I'll just do preset. So that's kind of what I use all the time. I think everything is probably pretty much the same. Looks like I turned off bloom and some other things. But it looks good. I'm going to take these teeth, all these teeth. I'm going to validate them, hit yes. I'm going to do a quick save. And now I want these teeth to look a little bit better. So I'm just going to voxel remesh them all together, like 200. So now they're just like one solid piece. I'll take smooth and just kind of smooth them out a little bit so that they're a little bit softer. I think that looks good. So next we'll just turn back on the environment. So let's go back to the lights. Now it's going to be bright, so we'll turn on the environment. If you want to change yours, you can change. There's all these environments that are in there. It's going to change the look. It might change some of the colors and a little bit of how the lighting hits it, so just be aware of that. So we'll go back to mine. And you can adjust the exposure. I'm going to put my exposure down because I don't want it super, super black. So we're just using the environment as sort of like a fill light, just so the shadows are not so over the top black. Okay, it looks really good. So let's change, this is something that I always do. Let's change the arms, the feet, ears, we don't have to do the eyes. Let's leave the eyes. Cube, teeth. Let's change all this to subsurface. So now let's go to this little sphere and tap subsurface. And let's turn it down a little bit. So what subsurface does is it kind of just makes it look more organic. It gives the light will sort of shine through this a little bit. And you can play around with it. Obviously, if you put it all the way up, then it's going to be super, super see-through, kind of like our skin. But you can put it down so that it's kind of a normal spot. That looks good. And everything looks great. And to paint, I'm not going to change the paint too much on this, but I'll show you how to do it just so you can paint. So we'll tap paint, tap here, and then find your color. So there's some preset colors here, or you can just go down here and find any color that you want. Once you find your color, you just hit paint all. Now, if you change the color and you're like, oh, I wanted to go back to the other color, tap your eyedropper, put it on the color if you still have, and then you can just go back here and hit paint all. Now, let's say we want the teeth glossy. You can tap here. So we see roughness. You can turn that all the way down and hit paint all, and the teeth will be glossy. It's kind of hard to see. Let's make the body glossy just so you can see. So now you can see the difference in how the light hits it. It's much glossier. And one last thing, so now you know how to color. You can color all these different parts if you want. But let's go back to the eyes. And let's say we want to make the eyes glow. So let's take these, let's just validate the eyes, clone them. So now we have eyes 1. I'm going to rename this eye additive. So eye additive. And then just go to the materials tab and change it to additive. And then tick always unlit. So now we can raise the brightness of those eyes. I think it looks good. So feel free to adjust, change the colors, have fun, but that's pretty much it for the tutorial. I love this little guy. I think he's really cute. So if you want to export him, just make sure you have all these bells and whistles on. Make sure it looks exactly how you want. Go here, let's do a quick save. And scroll down. I know you're going to see export and you kind of want to, you think that you'll be able to export the image, but it's really render. So you want to render the image. So we want to render it. So I'm going to use this for the thumbnail probably. So if I was going to do that, I would just hit transparent background. That way it'll only export the 3D sculpt and not the purple. But you can leave it on if you want. Okay, we'll leave render ratio. So we have screen. You can play around with these if there's something special you want. I usually just do screen, export, and then your file will export, your sculpt will export, and then you just have to pick where you want to save it. But that's pretty much it. This was a fun little character, and I actually did this on live stream, but I wanted to do an official one just as because I think it's great to just use a lot of shapes, use a lot of the tools. So it's a great little exercise just to kind of get to know the tools and kind of start creating really dynamic, cute characters out of super simple shapes. So let me know if that is helpful. Say what's up in the comments. I appreciate all of you. Thanks for watching my lives and things like that. And also check out my Skillshare courses. Skillshare is the reason that I'm able to do all of these videos and make free videos. It's all because of Skillshare. I have about 55 classes on there now, a bunch of 3D with Nomad Sculpt classes. I love teaching there. So make sure you check that out. And if you can, take some classes from me there, because then you can also take all the other classes that Skillshare has to offer. So it's pretty good. So I'm going to export this to my computer. Okay, once it's done, we'll just go back and let's do a nice little turntable. And actually, let's maybe I'll hide the floor. So we'll hide the floor. I like it. I'm going to save this view. So I go to the camera, hit add view, and I just like to name it 1. So that's how you can just save a view. So if you're messing around with it and you want to go back exactly where it was, that's how you do it. So I'm going to tap here. When this comes up, that's when I do a nice little screen record. I hit screen record on my iPad. I like to hit 000, hit the turntable. Looks great. Over to the middle. And then we're good to go with a nice turntable. If you have questions or if you have an issue, sometimes it's really difficult for me to answer here on YouTube. So what I've done is created a Facebook group It's 3D Sculpt and Chill with Drug-Free Dave. So it's a Facebook group. It's private right now, so just find it on Facebook. And then once you're in the group, take a video of your issue. So just take a video of the issue, and you can explain or you can write in the comments, but it's easier to see. If I can see your whole screen and see what you're doing, that makes it easier for me to assess what's happening and how I can help. So feel free to go and join that group. Even if you don't have any questions, feel free to go and join that group. Sometimes I'll just hang out there and post things and chat and stuff like that. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to go more in depth, then definitely check out my Skillshare classes where I am a top teacher. I have about 50 classes, both Procreate and Nomad Sculpt. I also have a few classes on Udemy, so if you want to learn more, or you just like my style, you like the way I teach, you want to support me, those are some other places that you can do it. Thanks again, keep drawing, keep sculpting. I'll see you all in the next video.